Chapter 1. The Presentation.
If you have seen the introductory presentation before, please continue on to Chapter 2. The Public Testimony. The Planning Board audio experienced technical difficulties. We will skip forward to the point where audio was re-established.
You can hear us who's on. We didn't mute the room, right?
We didn't. We're good.
Okay, great.
We're all good.
Okay, so next.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. All right. So a really important part of developing a general plan is community engagement. Throughout this planning process, we worked really hard to understand what it is that the community wants for their future. So now I'm going to walk through a few of the highlights from the process. For those of you who have been following along since the summer of 2020, you'll remember that we kicked off this process during COVID, just when COVID hit. And that presented us with a good number of challenges, but also a lot of opportunities. We were able to offer virtual meetings and workshops, online surveys, various focus groups and discussions. And we think that that helped us engage more people than we ever have in the past. As a result of all of this outreach and engagement during COVID and beyond, we've received approximately 12,000 comments from the public. We have facilitated or held nearly 100 community meetings, including about 32 focus groups. And now we have nearly 2,000 people subscribed to our Howard Design email list. And that's unprecedented for any planning process in Howard County. So we're pretty happy with the engagement, and thank you to everyone who has been participating since 2020. Another really unique and important aspect of this plan is how we integrated a diversity, equity, and inclusion lens into the plan and the process. And how we did that was we held numerous focus groups. A lot of those 32 focus groups were focused on engaging untraditionally underrepresented populations. And those were coordinated with a lot of community-based organizations. And who we consider to be some of those underrepresented populations are renters, young adults, people who represent who are from diverse racial and ethnic groups, and small business owners. And through this process, we were able to engage more than 100 people. And what we were able to do as a result of that input that we received is we summarized what we heard not only through our traditional engagement, but also what we heard through these focus groups within the general plan. And within each chapter, we incorporated best practices from the American Planning Association for how we can advance equity in general plans. And how a more equitable future, how the plan defines a more equitable future is being able to build a future ripe with opportunities for all people in all communities, including access to attainable housing, amenity-rich neighborhoods, high-quality education, and economically uplifting employment. So for those of you who are interested in learning more about the specific engagement activities we did, we do have an engagement summary on our website in addition to the comment log. The engagement summary describes all of our engagement activities and provides key feedback that we heard throughout the process. And the comment log, for those of you who are interested, has those 12,000 written responses that we received from all those surveys. But it's there if you would care to review it. So then, another piece, in addition to community engagement, that's a part of developing a general plan, is extensive data analysis. So what we did is, at the beginning of the process, we hired a multidisciplinary team of outside consultants to study a variety of trends, especially looking forward into the next 20 years. And this included looking at land supply and market demand. And on the supply side, Howard County is largely built out. Only about 2% of our land area remains undeveloped and unpreserved. However, demand for new housing, employment, and commercial uses remains strong through 2040. For those of you looking at the slide, that demand is depicted on the right-hand side of the screen. So our consultants projected up to 16.5 million square feet of commercial space over the next 20 years. We could see there's demand for 59,000 new jobs. Of course, as those jobs increase, so does the demand for housing, which is estimated at 31,000 units. So that housing demand is based on the projected new jobs that could come to the county. Also, what our market and economic consultants pointed out was that based on our current jobs in the county, we actually have an undersupply of housing units to the tune of about 20,000. Sometimes you might hear of that as being referred to as pent-up demand. So part of what a general plan does is it looks at where we should put this growth, especially given the limited land supply. It takes a look at how much growth can we accommodate and at what pace to ensure a fiscally sustainable future. And how do we balance the need for this new housing with all of the other needs that we have here in the county, such as protecting our natural resources, planning for infrastructure, and retaining our employment areas. So given the limited land supply, Hoco by Design proposes over the next 20 years, remember it's a long-range plan, that a good bit of this new residential development occur through redevelopment in places that the plan identifies as activity centers. An activity center is a compact mixed-use development that is walkable and offers employment, open space, housing, and multiple transportation options. So that means that these are places that as they're redeveloped, they could be greener, because as you redevelop them, you could incorporate stormwater management, and you could even integrate, and the plan is also to integrate open space in some of these areas. These areas would have a mix of uses, such as community gathering spaces and recreational amenities, again, all in a walkable environment, so again, also greener, more environmentally friendly and sensitive. It can be planned and redeveloped with a better transit infrastructure, such as sidewalks and bike paths and transit connections. And it could be planned to have a variety of housing types, such as multifamily homes, townhomes, and even missing middle housing types. And there's more on those missing middle housing types on a future slide. The plan also recommends that within these activity centers that there be incentives provided for income restricted housing for low to moderate income households, that there be accommodations made for age restricted housing, and that there also be incentives to provide for people with disabilities. Okay. So this slide now compares Plan Howard 2030 growth areas to Hoco by Design growth areas. And for those of you familiar with the last general plan, which was Plan Howard 2030, the area in orange is what was called a targeted growth and revitalization area. So those were the targeted growth areas in the last general plan. However, now Hoco by Design is trying to be much more targeted, much more focused. And these are the places that our activity centers also referred to as areas to transform. And that only covers about 2% of the county. So when you compare the left to the right, that's the growth area from Plan Howard 2030 on the left compared to the growth area in Hoco by Design on the right. And creating and identifying much more targeted discrete areas for the significant growth, we think really creates a more predictable plan. And this helps us, knowing exactly where this more amount of this growth will help us better plan for our infrastructure needs. The plan also recognizes that outside of activity center, some remaining new housing development will continue to be residential infill development in existing neighborhoods as allowed under current zoning. However, this plan does call for changing the county zoning regulation to allow that some of this infill and new development be both attached and detached accessory dwelling units, and also to allow these missing middle housing types. Missing middle housing types are basically small to medium-sized home choices, generally available at a variety of price points. Typically, it's 2 or more lots, or 2 or more units on one lot. And the types of homes are housing units or structures like duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, and cottage courts. The plan proposes that these diverse housing types could help lead to more affordable housing options due to just being smaller in nature. But however, the plan also calls for various ways to advance our housing affordability goals through the Moderate Income Housing Unit Program and through other programs and other incentives. As a part of our data analysis as we were developing this general plan, we also considered if there could be a significant expansion of the plan service area. So to what extent outside of our PSA, or it's also called PSA, so to what extent could the area outside of the PSA be a growth opportunity? However, when we did this analysis, we found that there were several challenges. So this map shows that a lot of the land west of the PSA is either already preserved or has been subdivided into individual lots under separate ownership. So on the map, it shows that there's a limited number of undeveloped parcels that have the potential for significant development. Those areas are pretty much identified in yellow. And they're scattered throughout the West. So trying to capture all of these undeveloped parcels in what would be what we call a large wholesale expansion would be fairly cost prohibitive, because it would be very expensive to extend water sewer lines across preserved farmland to reach some of these areas. It would end up putting housing in places that's far away from existing infrastructure like public transit, and it would have an adverse impact on the rural character and agricultural uses that are in the West. The county has a 50-year history of preserving land in the West, and the general plan does propose to continue to do so. So as consistent with previous general plans, Hoco by Design proposes, we're not on this slide quite yet. So consistent with the previous general plan, Hoco by Design proposes with regards to the PSA that we provide limited and predictable plan service expansions that are adjacent to the existing PSA via a general plan amendment process. So this could be considered for situations like expansions for a public or institutional use, such as a religious facility or academic school, so that is currently allowed. But what we added to this general plan is that a PSA or a general plan amendment for planned service area expansion could be considered for development opportunities that increase the supply of housing affordable to low to moderate income households, such as missing middle housing or housing for older adults. So we felt this approach could guarantee that expansions of the PSA would yield affordable units. So based on all of this data analysis and community input that we've received, we developed also a part of this plan, which is a future land use map that does strive to balance growth and conservation. The future land use map has what we call 18 character areas. So think of those character areas as broad land use categories that are intended to provide generalized guidance on preferred development types, patterns, and intensities that will help define a sense of place. This is different from a zoning map. So a zoning map, along with its defined zoning districts, defines permitted uses, densities, and development standards such as setbacks, building heights, and parking requirements. So while this future land use map is not a zoning map, it will help inform future zoning changes once we undertake that comprehensive rezoning. So basically, if you want to, so how the flume helps depict our future growth and conservation strategy. So for example, you can see how we have all of the open space that's currently in the county that's been identified on this map. This means that if it's identified as open space, it is intended to remain as open space. And 39% of the county is currently permanently preserved. Other types of characters that you can see on the map, there's the industrial character area. That's the area in gray along Route 1. So that's an area where we intend to retain industrial land and ensure that there are industrial employment opportunities in those locations. And then all of the activity centers, the variety of types of activity centers have been identified on this map, and that's where the most significant amount of growth will be targeted through redevelopment. And I'm going to turn it over to Kate to talk a little bit about the plan contents and notable changes that have occurred in between the public draft and this draft before the planning board tonight.
Great. Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Kate Bollinger, and I'm a planning supervisor with the Department of Planning and Zoning. So there are 11 chapters and 3 appendices in Hoco by Design. We also have the Route 1 corridor plan. So altogether, these documents total on the order of 700 pages. So we did a deeper dive on all of this in our 3 work sessions that we held with the planning board. So what I'm going to do is just hit on the highlights from the chapters and then emphasize the really notable changes that we made to the draft. But it's worth noting that there is a 30-page document on our website where we've itemized all of the changes that we made since the public draft and also since the 5 planning theme chapters were rolled out over the past year. So when you're looking at the planning theme chapters, those are really the 3rd draft of those themes. So, again, I'm going to highlight the notable changes that were made, but hopefully when you looked at the chart, you saw comments that were addressed from the workshops. All right. So to begin with the highlights from the plan, you might recall that one of the important portions of output from the early engagement that we did. And the data analysis that we did was identifying those 5 planning themes. And they're meant to address cross-cutting issues related to the environment, transportation, economic development, housing, and character. And so at a very high level, what these themes do, and these are chapters 3 to 7, is they address protecting our ecological health and addressing climate change, creating a safer, more equitable transportation system, lifting up small and local businesses while retaining industrial land that generates good paying jobs, supporting the agricultural community, promoting missing middle housing, accessory dwelling units, and a mix of age-friendly housing options, and preserving the unique character of the many areas and neighborhoods that are found around the county. So then, in addition to the 5 planning themes, we have another set of chapters that together really give the direction on the framework for growth and conservation and recommendations for managing future growth and how we should plan for our future infrastructure needs, including public schools. So chapter 2 is the growth and conservation framework chapter. And this is where the strategy to balance growth and conservation is laid out. And so much of what Mary covered with the findings of the data and analysis and the future land use map is found in this chapter. And then we have chapter 8, which is a new chapter covering public schools. And we're going to talk more about this in a moment. Chapter 9 is supporting infrastructure, and it evaluates and plans for infrastructure needs like parks and recreation, fire and rescue, water sewer, and public safety. And this chapter also offers recommendations for how to make capital budgeting more sustainable and equitable. So, and one more chapter, I'm jumping ahead. In this set is Managing Growth. And Managing Growth, Chapter 10, gives direction on changes needed in the Adequate Public Facilities Ordinance to account for current and anticipated development patterns. APFO aims to control the pace of development to ensure adequate school capacity and road capacity in relation to new growth. And this chapter contains the housing allocation chart, which caps the number of new units that can be built each year by geographic region. Once the annual cap is reached, subdivision plans are placed on hold until the next year when more allocations are made available. And an APFO task force must be convened within a year of general plan adoption. So the Managing Growth chapter gives the task force direction to inform how the APFO school capacity test and associated chart could be changed to optimize the growth targets in Hoco by design while also maintaining adequate school capacity. All right. So here's the first of one of the notable sets of changes that we wanted to call your attention to. And so in response to the public draft, we heard a desire to increase residential growth targets, particularly to expand the supply of affordable housing. So we heard from various groups and individuals who were advocating for increasing the housing supply affordable to all income levels, particularly for members of the county's workforce, seniors, people with disabilities, and young adults. And these community members felt that the housing targets should be higher to address affordability and to better align with the demand that Mary spoke about with the 31,000 new units, in addition to that pent-up demand that she referred to, the 20,000 new units. So in Chapter 2, we increased the target. It had been set at 25,000. It was increased to 27,000. And while this figure does not meet the full demand of 31,000 or the pent-up demand, it is, however, more in line with available supply and also more in line with the pace of growth that's been experienced over the past 20 years. And there's going to be a little more on that in a moment. And so in the Dynamic Neighborhoods chapter, we also added targets for affordable and accessible units. And these were originally proposed in the Housing Opportunities Master Plan. So to encourage greater affordability and accessibility, we added an action to establish a working group to explore the feasibility of a targeted incentive program, which could be a zoning overlay. And so the purpose would be to incentivize the production of affordable and accessible units that would not otherwise be required by the zoning code. And following on those changes, we also updated the Apfo allocation chart in managing growth. So what we did with the chart is we added a new set-aside column. You can see it in kind of the periwinkle column on the right. So that's a new set-aside column for affordable housing. That's similar to the set-aside column that was already there for green neighborhoods. That's in green. So these additional allocations are bonus units that could help increase the supply of affordable housing above and beyond, again, what is currently required under zoning, under the county's moderate income housing unit program, and could assist the county to reach the targets that are recommended in the Housing Opportunities Master Plan. And so while the set-aside increases the total amount of units in the chart, it still allows for a pace that's similar to what's been realized over the past 20 years. The new annual average in this chart is 1580 compared to the 1537 that's been experienced per year over the past 20 years. All right, and another major change that was made in this document is the addition of a new chapter devoted to schools. So this is the new chapter 8. We received feedback that community members wanted more information on schools, and some residents were calling for a chapter specifically devoted to it. So general plans typically don't have a chapter dedicated to public school facilities, but the department decided to include it in response to these community requests and concerns. And so what this chapter includes, it combines and expands upon content that was previously located in supporting infrastructure and managing growth. And then it adds quite a bit of information, including an overview of the processes and considerations that are associated with planning for schools in Howard County. And it provides policies and actions that encourage collaboration to identify school sites that meet the needs of the student population and anticipated future growth patterns. It suggests that the county and HCPSS partner to leverage additional public and private resources to meet school facility needs. It seeks to develop flexible tools to allow for alternative school designs and adaptive reuse of underutilized properties. And it responds to the need for school facilities to support early childhood education programs. So while the vast majority of planning for schools is and will continue to be conducted by HCPSS, this chapter provides more detailed recommendations for improving collaboration and partnerships with respect to locating funding and building facilities that meet the needs of the student population. All right, so we've walked through now the high points of the first 10 chapters, Chapter 11's implementation. Just a reminder that this is the chapter that brings everything together with a detailed listing of all policies and actions, lead and partner agencies, timeframes, and it provides guidance on how to demonstrate the county's commitment to growth and conservation. It calls to expand the development monitoring system report with metrics on growth and conservation. And it also calls for a mid-cycle performance report, which is basically like a 5-year progress report on accomplishments. And then there's 3 technical appendices. The environment appendix is a supplement to the planning theme chapter on ecological health. It gets into more detail on topics like climate change and water quality, and it has been included to meet state requirements for a water resources element. The character areas appendix supplements growth and conservation, it supplements chapter 2, and it gets into all of the details of those 18 character areas that are shown on the flume. It has information and guidance on items like street and block pattern, building types and massing, and more. And then the focus areas appendix supplements the quality by design, that's the planning theme on character. This appendix provides illustrative concepts for Newtown, for Gateway, and for the rural crossroads, and those are meant to help guide future zoning, design guideline updates, and also the Gateway master plan. And so the last piece out of the 700 some pages is our Route 1 plan. And so this is meant to be read as a supplement to the broader policies and implementing actions of Hoco by Design. So many may recall that in 2018, the county launched a master planning initiative to develop recommendations for revitalizing Route 1. There was a year of public engagement that included workshops, open houses, and surveys. And what ended up happening is we folded that initiative into the Hoco by Design process. And by doing that, we were able to consider and incorporate what we heard from that process throughout Hoco by Design and this Route 1 plan. We were able to use data and recommendations that have been developed through assessments for that process. And we got to include Route 1 in Hoco by Design's modeling and growth scenarios. And that allowed for a more comprehensive evaluation relative to the entire county. So the Route 1 corridor plan, at a very high level, its vision is to preserve Washington Boulevard as an industrial employment and transportation corridor while targeting very specific areas for mixed-use redevelopment through activity centers. And in Route 1, some of the areas in the activity centers are intended to allow light industrial uses within mixed-use areas. So the vision is trying to achieve a greater balance between non-residential and residential growth by targeting this construction of new residential units in the activity centers and then encouraging non-residential opportunities elsewhere, all while maintaining the limited supply of industrial land. There are a couple of changes that we made. There's some refinements to activity centers in Route 1 since we last showed you the public draft. So what we changed for Route 1 activity centers was in response to a concern that we heard about the need to further support industrial businesses and their continuation in Route 1. So we got feedback that we should look at how we had set the boundaries of the activity centers and how we had assigned the character areas to make sure that industrial uses could continue. We also heard about the need to figure out ways to direct trucks away from residential areas in these activity centers. So what we did is we modified the plans, the maps that show up in the Route 1 plan and also the character areas on our future land use map. So in the Dorsey Activity Center, we removed areas surrounding Kit Kat Road from the activity center. And what that does is it maintains those areas as industrial, and it allows trucks to continue to access Dorsey Run Road south of the activity center. And then in Elk Ridge, to ensure light industrial uses are allowed to continue, and in support of the plan's goal to retain industrial land, we reassigned areas surrounding Pine Avenue. They had been characterized as mixed use, and we reclassified those to industrial mixed use.
Can you repeat again what you said about Elk Ridge?
In Elk
Pine
Ridge,
Avenue?
yeah, it had been classified as mixed use, and we reclassified it to industrial mixed use
Okay.
in order to allow industrial uses to continue.
Okay. So the high school is gonna be in the front. The Elkridge High School plan to be on
Sure.
south.
Let's, no, it's
Okay.
not.
Sure, I'm sorry.
Yeah, we only have a couple slides left, so we're in the home stretch. Okay, so also on the topic of maintaining industrial uses, we also heard about this in Colombia. And we heard that there's opportunity to maintain industrial employment where it's currently allowed under FDP and it's successful. So what we did, this is the Snowden Dobbin Activity Center, and we reclassified an area that had been mixed use. That's the pink in the map to the left, and we reclassified it to light industrial. And that's like a darker shade of pink. We also reclassified a portion of that area to industrial. And I want to point out here that there was an error in the plan as far as mapping this. There was a technical issue with layer stacking. So it's been resolved in the map that you see in front of you that says March 2023 flume. And it will also appear this way in the version of the draft that goes to council. All right. And then one final change, notable change that we wanted to call your attention to also with respect to Columbia. So we received feedback that Hoco by design would be improved if it elaborated on Newtown's unique nature and characteristics and some of the elements that stand out about Newtown zoning. So we ended up adding new text where we highlight the major provisions of Newtown zoning, including its flexibility in land use, its open space provisions, and its overall housing density. And we also made clear that the general plan does not change these zoning provisions, since any changes would have to be considered through a public zoning process. And so with that, we're going to conclude our presentation just with a reminder of the planning board's role tonight, which is to hold a public hearing for input and recommendation to the council on the proposed adoption of Hoco by design, which includes a plan for the Route 1 corridor.
Thank you. Any questions from the board?
No, just a lot of work. Thank you.